Good morning, everyone. Treasure Troller here. We are in White Cloud, Michigan. We're at the Newaygo County offices. I think the courthouse is right around the side. And so today, or this morning, I'm going to bring you another one of our small town murders. So a little bit of the backstory on this before we start and get into what happened. It's a story that has to do with Glenna and Marty Durham, and they were married for about 12 years. This was the second marriage for both. There were no children from this marriage. Children were from the first marriage. Marty, they considered him a bit of a miser. And Glenna, well, she liked to gamble. She liked to buy lottery tickets. So, with that in mind, let's get into it. So Marty and Glenna had a next door neighbor, and her name was Connie Reams. They were very close. As a matter of fact, she used to talk to one of the Durhams every day. Mostly she would talk to Glenna. Well, she had not heard from Glenna in a couple of days, and that was around the 12th of May 2015. So she took it upon herself to go over to their house and check in on them. And when Connie walked into the house, she found the bodies of Marty and Glenna on the floor. So she immediately called law enforcement and paramedics, and they showed up and they started going over the crime scene. And one of the law enforcement officers noticed that Glenna still might be alive. And when they assessed Glenna, she actually was. She kind of woke up and was a little bit scared and nervous and wondered what everybody was doing there. So Glenna went from being a victim. By the way, Marty was shot 5 times, so there was no bringing Marty back. So she went from a murdered victim to one that had been escaped a fatal incident. Well, that theory lasted about 1 day. When the next day, Marty's kids broke into the house. They picked the lock with a credit card, picked the door, and got in. And they started looking around, and they found a couple of envelopes. And both envelopes contained money, but one envelope also contained a suicide note that Glenna had written to one of her friends, asking her to kind of look after her kids and telling the kids how that was the best thing that ever happened to her in her life. So now Glenna became a suspect in a murdered attempted suicide. Now the case was didn't seem to be going quick enough for Marty's family. I think they pretty much wanted her, lock her up, throw away the key kind of thing. So one of Marty's cousins was married to Fran Phelan. And Fran offered her assistance. You see, Fran was a psychic. And Fran told law enforcement to look underneath the cushion and also to look in the right hand, or the right hand. She didn't say which one, but the right hand had some significance. So actually what had happened was they looked underneath a sofa on the couch, or the cushion on the sofa couch, and they actually found the murder weapon. And in Marty's right hand, they found hair. They found strands of dark hair. No further information was released about who the hair was from, where it came from, anything like that. So for her assistance in this, they wanted to know where Fran was at the time of the murder, and they wanted them to give her her alibi. And I mean, now this is just me, but she shouldn't have seemed surprised. I mean, being a psychic and all, she should have saw that coming. But that's just me. So if that didn't move the case along any quicker, there was one other interview that the family wanted them to interview. And that was Bud. Bud was actually there when the crime was committed. So Bud essentially was an eyewitness. And law enforcement agencies at that point in time had not interviewed Bud. And they really didn't want to interview Bud. They really weren't sure how to interview Bud. But the family really wanted them to interview Bud. But they never did interview Bud. Because, see, Bud was an African gray parrot. They wanted law enforcement to interview Bud, the African gray parrot. And to show why they wanted Bud interviewed was they actually videotaped Bud and gave it to local media outlets, which had Bud on his cage, on his perch, in a male voice saying, "Don't bleeping shoot. Don't bleeping shoot," over and over. But thankfully, with the evidence at hand, without the interview with Bud, and without the maybe with some small assistance from the psychic, definitely without the interview from Bud, they were able to convict Glenna on murder, and she is serving a life sentence in prison. So, with that, this is Treasure Troller for Black Bugatti, Lamont at Large, YouTube's Most Wanted, etc., etc., etc. This is Treasure Troller saying aloha and good day.